Sadhana Pada, this is section 2 of the Yoga Sutras, Sutra 22. kṛtārthaṃ, prati, naṣṭam, api anasṭam, anyasādhāraṇatvāt. Sadhāraṇatvāt. kṛtārthaṃ, prati, naṣṭam, api anasṭam, anyasādhāraṇatvāt. Sadhāraṇatvāt. One whose purpose has been fulfilled for to destroyed non-existent, although not destroyed, existent, then that to others on account of being common. Although it becomes non-existent for him whose purpose has been fulfilled, it continues to exist for others on account of being common to others besides him. This sutra again deals with a purely theoretical problem of philosophy connected with the relationship existing between Purusha and Prakriti. Yeah, what's going on with everyone else, right? Because it's different than what's going on with you. If the purpose of Prakriti is to enable the Purusha to obtain self-realization, what happens to it when the purpose has been fulfilled? The answer given is that Prakriti ceases to exist as far as that Purusha is concerned. But what does this mean? Does Prakriti cease to exist altogether? Obviously not, because the other Purushas who have not attained Kaivalya still remain under its influence and continue to work for their emancipation. If Prakriti ceases to exist only for the self-realized Purusha, then it is purely subjective in its nature, or has it an independent existence of its own? The answer to this fundamental question differs according to different schools of thought which have tried to speculate about it. According to Vedanta, even Prakriti, the substratum of the phenomenal world, is a purely subjective thing, the product of Maya. According to Samkhya, which provides to a great extent the theoretical basis of the yogic philosophy, Prakriti has an independent existence of its own. Purusha and Prakriti are the two ultimate, eternal, and independent principles in existence. Purushas are many, Prakriti is one. The Purushas get involved in matter, go through the cycle of evolution under the fostering care of Prakriti, attain self-realization, and then pass out of the illusion and influence of Prakriti altogether. But Prakriti always remains the same. It will be seen that there is no real contradiction involved in these two views. Vedanta merely carries the process of idealization to a further stage, which alone can be the ultimate stage. In it, the multiplicity of the Purushas on the one hand, and the duality of the Purushas and the Prakriti on the other, are integrated into a higher conception of the one reality. It may be pointed out here that a system of philosophy, however lofty and true it may be, should not be expected to give us an absolutely correct picture of the transcendent truths as they really exist. Because philosophy works through the medium of the intellect, and the intellect has its inherent limitations, it cannot understand or formulate truths which are beyond its scope. So in dealing in its own way with these realities of the spiritual life, it can give us only partial and distorted interpretations of those realities. Contradictions, paradoxes, and inconsistencies are inevitable when we try to see and interpret these realities through the instrumentality of the intellect. We have to accept these limitations when we use the intellect as an instrument for understanding and discovering these truths in the initial stages. It is no use throwing away this instrument, poor and imperfect as it is, because it gives us at least some help in organizing our efforts to know the truth in the only way in which it can be known, by self-realization. If we want to know any country, the only way to do it is to go and see it with our own eyes. But that does not mean that we should throw away the maps and plans which are meant to give us a rough idea with regard to the country. These do not give us true knowledge with regard to the country, but they do help us in finding the country and seeing it directly with our own eyes. Philosophy, at its best, serves only this kind of purpose. Those who are content to take it as a substitute for the real truth blunder. Those who ignore it completely also make a mistake, because they throw away a thing which might be usefully utilized in the attainment of their objective. The wise student of yoga takes the various doctrines of philosophy and religion lightly, as tentative explanations and interpretations of truths beyond the realm of the intellect, but uses them as best as he can in his direct discovery of those truths. Yoga is an essentially practical science, and the truths and experiences which it deals with are not dependent upon the particular philosophy or philosophies which are put forward to provide a rational picture of the objective and the various processes which lead to it. We do not know really the nature of electricity. There are many theories, but that does not prevent us from utilizing this force for gaining our physical ends in 1,001 ways. In the same way, the philosophy which provides the theoretical background of yoga and its inadequacies does not affect materially the results which can be obtained by the practice of yoga. Let us give philosophy its proper place in the study of yoga and not mix it up with the practical and scientific part of the subject. Okay. Sutra 23. Svasvami Shaktyo. Svasvami Shaktyo. Svarupopalabhi. Svarupopalabdi. Bdi hetu. Svarupopalabdi hetu. It's a strange word. Svarupopalabdi hetu. Samyoga. Svasvami Shaktyo. Svarupopalabdi hetu. Samyoga. Of it, Prakriti, and of the master, Purusha, of the two powers, own form, real or essential nature, experiencing, knowledge, cause, reason, purpose, union, coming together. The purpose of the coming together of the Purusha and Prakriti is gaining by the Purusha of the awareness of his true nature and the unfoldment of powers inherent in him and Prakriti. So now they're saying the unfoldment of the powers inherent in the seer and the powers inherent in Prakriti. So there are, well, let's see what they say. It is generally thought that the idea of evolution is an entirely new contribution made by science to modern civilization, and Darwin is considered to be the father of this idea. But as we often say, there is nothing new under the sun, and the idea of evolution has come down to us in one form or another from the earliest times. It would be really surprising if the masterminds who lived in the past and who had such a wonderful grasp of the essential realities of life had missed this important and all-pervading law underlying the manifestation of life. It is perhaps true that this law was not studied and presented in the detailed form that we have it now, but then nothing pertaining to the phenomenal world, which was not essential for real human happiness, was studied by them in great detail. it was thought sufficient to have a general idea of the fundamental principles. They never lost sight of the limitations of the intellect and probably did not consider it worthwhile wasting their time and energy on the accumulation of unnecessary details with regard to the general principles, which at best could be understood very imperfectly through the medium of the illusion-bound intellect. It was thought that the energy which would be needed for gaining knowledge of the non-essential details had better be employed in unraveling the great mystery of life itself. For when that mystery was unraveled, all the problems of life were understood automatically and simultaneously, and in a way, they could never be understood by a process of intellectual analysis and reasoning. But while these adepts in the science of life did not think it worth their while descending to non-essential details with regard to the facts of the phenomenal worlds, they tried and managed to get a wonderfully complete and true picture of the fundamental principles. It is this clear and firm grasp of the fundamental principles and laws which enabled them to put these principles and generalizations in the form of sutras. What a modern writer would take a chapter or book to convey was condensed in a masterly manner in a single sutra. There are many examples of such condensed knowledge in the Yoga Sutras, and Sutra 23, which is the one we're reading right now, which we shall now consider, is a striking instance of this nature. In one sutra, Patanjali has put the essential and fundamental idea underlying the theory of evolution, and also managed to bring into his generalization the most important aspect of evolution, which unfortunately is missing in the modern scientific theory. So absorbed are most of our modern scientists with details, so full of their own achievements, so obsessed by their materialistic outlook, that they often miss the most important aspects of their researches, aspects which are under their very noses and which they could not fail to recognize if they were at all open-minded. The theory of evolution, which we are now considering, is a case in point. According to the modern theory, considered in a very general way, there is an evolutionary trend discernible in the bodies of plants and animals, and the bodies, in their effort to adapt themselves to their environment, develop new powers and capacities. Putting the idea in a different way, we may say that the study of the form side of living creatures shows that these forms are steadily, though slowly, becoming more and more complex and capable of expressing the powers which are inherent in life. Life and form are always found together. The forms are found to evolve. What about life? Modern science does not know, and what is more surprising, does not care to know. The forms are found to evolve. What about the life? Modern science does not know, and what is more surprising, does not care to know. For the idea that life evolves side by side with form is well known and is really complementary to the idea of the evolution of forms, which has been developed by science. It is by combining these ideas of the evolution of life with that of the evolution of forms that the theory of evolution becomes intelligible and its beauty and significance are revealed. The forms evolve to provide better vehicles for the evolving life. The mere evolution of forms would be a meaningless process in a universe in which all natural phenomena appear to be guided by intelligence and design. And yet modern science is pursuing this idea of the evolution of forms and refusing to combine it with its complementary idea. No wonder it got bogged in a plethora of details in this field and missed the discovery of some basic facts of general and vital interest to humanity. Sutra 23 answers the question, why is Purusha brought into contact with Prakriti, The answer is to unfold the powers latent in Prakriti and himself, and to enable him to gain self-realization. Okay, let's read that again. Why is Purusha brought into contact with Prakriti? The answer is to unfold the powers latent in Prakriti and himself, and to enable him to gain self-realization. That is the complete idea of evolution in a nutshell. But it is necessary to elaborate this idea to understand its full implications. Let us first see what are the powers of Purusha and Prakriti referred to in this sutra. In order to understand this, we have only to recall how total evolution leads to the gradual unfoldment of consciousness on the one hand, and pari passu, to the increase in the efficiency of the vehicles on the other. Leaving out of account the mineral kingdom, in which the unfoldment of consciousness is so rudimentary as to be hardly perceptible, we find on studying the vegetable, animal, and human kingdoms that consciousness in these kingdoms shows a remarkable increase in the degree of unfoldment as we pass from one kingdom to another. And side by side with the unfoldment of consciousness, we find that the vehicle also becomes more and more complex and efficient for the expression of the unfoldment of consciousness. Not only do we find a remarkable increase in this dual evolution of life and form as we pass from one kingdom to another, but taking any one kingdom by itself, we can trace the steady evolution from one step to another, so that we can see the whole ladder of life as far as it can be seen with our limitations, stretching from the mineral kingdom to the civilized stage of the human kingdom with hardly any rungs missing. What do we mean by the powers of Prakriti referred to in this sutra? Obviously, these are not the general powers which are inherent in nature and which are independent, as it were, of the dual evolution of life and form which is taking place around us. The powers of Prakriti, to which reference is made here, are undoubtedly the capacities which develop in the vehicles as they evolve in association with consciousness. Compare the brain of a snail with that of a monkey, and this again with that of a highly civilized man, and you see the tremendous change which has taken place as regards the capacity of the vehicle to express the powers which are latent in consciousness. And the mental and spiritual powers which are exhibited by the highly civilized and intellectual men and women of today are as nothing compared to the powers which are developed by the advanced yogi and which are in store for every child of man when he undertakes his higher evolution. A study of the various siddhis or occult powers which are dealt with in section 3 of the Yoga Sutras will give the student some idea of the latent capacities which are lying hidden within each one of us, capacities which can be developed by the technique outlined in this book. It is necessary to distinguish between the powers of Prakriti and Purusha, although the two are generally exercised in conjunction. The power of Prakriti is obviously the capacity of the vehicle to respond to the demands of consciousness. A particular vehicle of consciousness is a certain combination of matter on a particular plane, integrated and held together by various forces, and its efficiency depends upon how far it can respond to the powers of consciousness. The brain of an idiot is made of the same substance as the brain of a highly intellectual man, but there is a world of difference between the capacities of the two to respond to thought vibrations. It is in the increasing peculiarity and complexity of the vehicle that the secret of its greater responsiveness and efficiency lies, and this is what evolution of the vehicle really means. If the response to consciousness, if the response to consciousness determines the evolution of the vehicle, what is meant by the unfoldment of the powers of consciousness or Purusha? According to yogic philosophy, consciousness itself does not evolve. It is in some way It is in some way which is incomprehensible to the intellect, perfect, complete, and eternal. When we refer to the powers of the Purusha in this joint development of the powers of the two, what is meant is the power of consciousness to function through and in collaboration with the vehicle. As Purusha is pure consciousness, and consciousness is eternal, there cannot be an evolution of his powers in the sense in which we take the word evolution. But we may suppose that he has to acquire the capacity to use those in association with the matter of the different planes, so that as evolution proceeds, his consciousness is able to express itself more and more fully on these planes and to manipulate and control his vehicles with increasing freedom and efficiency. What a tremendous task this is, can be grasped only when we study in detail the long process of evolution through the different kingdoms of nature and the total constitution of man, which is involved in the process. As long as we confine ourselves to the phenomenon of the physical plane, we can never have an adequate idea of the magnitude and nature of the task, even though on the physical plane also the different phases of this long process present a stupendous spectacle. It is in the invisible realms of the mind and the spirit that evolution produces its most magnificent results, and the powers of the Purusha find their chief expression. Perhaps some idea of the necessity and manner of this development may be obtained from a simile. The music which a great musician can produce depends upon the quality and the efficiency of his instrument. Place an instrument in his hand which he has never used, and he will feel helpless till he has mastered that instrument. The poor quality of the instrument will handicap him enormously. The quality of the music which can be produced depends upon three factors. 1, the capacity of the musician, the efficiency of the instrument, and the coordination of the two. Even though the Purusha has all the powers potentially, unless he is provided with an efficient set of vehicles and learns to control and use these vehicles, he may remain a helpless spectator of the world drama which is being played around him. It is in some such way that we can visualize through the intellect the gradual unfoldment of the powers of the Purusha along with the powers of Prakriti, though fundamentally this question is an ultimate question connected with the why of manifestation and thus beyond the scope of the intellect. The simultaneous development of the vehicles on all the planes of manifestation and the capacity to use them is not the only purpose of bringing together Purusha and Prakriti. The Purusha has not only to master these vehicles, but has also to transcend them. For until and unless he can do this, he will remain under the limitations of the planes to which he is confined and be subject to their illusions. So what we were saying before, that the vehicles are what are causing the pratyaya, right? So you're always going to be subject to the pratyaya, which creates illusions of the different vehicles. So unless you transcend the vehicles, you're always going to be experiencing the pratyaya. But if you detach from it and see it for what it is, then you're like, oh, I see that that pratyaya is part of that vehicle, and I don't have to fall prey to the illusions created by that if I were attached to it, right? Does that make sense? He is destined to be above the limitations and illusions of those planes, as well as to be a master of those planes. This is what self-realization or svarupoplabdya, svarupopalabdi, Svarupopalabdhi. I've never heard of that word before. Svaru I've heard, but popalabdhi, popalabdhi, Svarupopalabdhi means to accomplish. This is what self-realization or Svarupopalabdhi means to accomplish. So they say when you're pronouncing Sanskrit, if there are certain words you can't pronounce, that's the sign of a blockage or an illusion that you haven't yet mastered, right? So this word clearly, I mean, I've never seen that word before, and I'm having a hard time pronouncing it. So clearly there's something there for me. These are not to be considered as two independent objectives. The complete mastery of the lower planes and their transcendence are really two aspects of the same problem, because complete mastery on these planes is not possible until the Purusha passes out of the control of Prakriti. Right? So you have to stop being subjected to what's going on here. And the last step in the mastery of anything generally consists in transcending it or going beyond its influence and control. Then only can we know it fully and control it completely. Let me read that again because this is very interesting. The complete mastery of the lower planes and their transcendence are really two aspects of the same problem, because complete mastery on these planes is not possible until the Purusha passes out of the control of Prakriti. The last step in the mastery of anything generally consists in transcending it or going beyond its influence and control. Then only we can know it fully and control it completely. Okay. The next one, I'm going to stop there for now because it's been a while. The next one is 24. We'll do that in the next video. Tasya hetur avidya. Its cause is the lack of awareness of his real nature. Okay. Thank you for joining me today. Until next time.